All right, it is Figgie and the Moose on this Thursday, both on the road on Pix 11 Plus. What's going on, Figgie? How you doing, bud?
I'm doing well, brother. Excited for a nice day, an off day for us, right?
No, not for me, for you. Yes, an off day for you. Yes, not don't. There's no us in that sentence. There's no us in that sentence. Enjoy
Good
your
point.
off day.
Good
Enjoy
point.
your off day. Yes, that's. But yes, there are no days off. What's going on, man? We got a lot of things to get into. Obviously, the latest and greatest with the Knicks. The Mets and Pete Alonso showing a little bit of power last night, and the Yankees getting shut down by the Cleveland Guardians. But the Mets Dodgers series continues to go out there and grab headlines. It's been fun. The Mets jumped out early on Tony Gosselin last night. Alonso with a big 2-run blast. He ends up hitting 2 home runs in the game. They win the game 6-1. Griffin Canning and the pitching lab has been a revelation for the Mets. And really, you could start to, as we're past Memorial Day weekend, we've hit the month of June. The July 4th, the celebration is not all that far off, Figgy. You could start to think about what this Met team conceivably and how dangerous they're going to be, come October when they get guys like Frankie Montas, and that starting rotation a lot healthier. You're starting to see the confidence and the swagger from Juan Soto once again. Scary moment last night when Lindor gets hit, but still, really good baseball team, and they continue to go out there and show it regardless of opponent.
Yeah, and I think this time, because of the opponent and because it's a guy like Griffin Canning, who last year was the worst starting pitcher in all of baseball, gave up the most runs in all of baseball, and you're sitting there with bated breath, knowing that dangerous Dodger lineup, and he looked masterful. I mean, he had all his pitches working. You saw swings that were very uncomfortable. You even saw Shohei Ohtani on that changeup that he threw him, that he jumped out the way, had so much movement, so much life, and kind of caught him off guard, because that's the one thing when you're a guy like Griffin Canning, where you don't have overpowering stuff, you got to rely on movement. You got to rely on unpredictability. And he's been able to do that. Just changing his pitch mix, which is a big thing that this pitching lab does. It says, let's pitch to your strengths. Your strength isn't a 4-seam fastball at 94, 95 miles an hour. So stop trying to get people out with your fastball. Show your fastball. Make people uncomfortable. Pitch hot up and in. You get them a little bit off balance, and then go with their bread and butter, the stuff that you're getting outs with, and they have a lower batting average, a lower slugging percentage with. And he's been able to maximize that. And it's so funny because it sounds so simple, right? So why isn't everybody being able to maximize on these pitchers like that? But I think it's a buy-in. When you're a pitcher and you're coming up and you're the hardest thrower in your town, you're the hardest thrower in your high school, you want to remain the hardest thrower. And when you get to the major leagues and you get to the level where you see guys throwing 102, 103, you have to kind of take a step back and say, you know what? Maybe I'm not going to be the hardest thrower anymore. I've got to be the best pitcher I can be. Rick Peterson was awesome with that when I was with the Mets. And he kept saying that. He goes, once you win the county fair of being the hardest thrower, there's nothing else. So you got to become the best pitcher that you can possibly be. You did enough to get drafted by throwing that hard, but now you got to be able to get outs and hit the glove. And Canning was outstanding last night.
Yeah, no one had a perm like Rick Peterson, I'll tell you that. And he was a hell of a pitching coach and a good guy. I'd say that jokingly, but Rick Peterson, salt of the earth kind of a guy as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're right about that with when you look at Canning, and then you're starting to look at the what I thought was going to define this Met lineup coming into the year, which was the starting lineup. And they're starting to get going a little bit. Alonso was hot, then he was really cold. Now he's starting to heat up once again. Lindor is giving you leadoff home runs in big moments. Soto's starting to go out there and get going. Yes, it stinks that Vientos is on the IL. Ronnie Mauricio is not going to get a little bit of burn. Brett Beatty has shown himself to be more than just a AAA and a half ball player. I mean, we could get into the weeds and talk about, whether or not Luis Torrens is a better option at catcher than Alvarez based on what we have seen on the field.
Right.
But maybe the more you see of Luis Torrens, the less effective he's going to go out there and be. You'd like to see McNeil round back into the form where he was a batting champion in the National League. But this is a really good lineup, a really deep lineup, obviously highlighted by the top of that lineup. And I think they're starting to get going as the warmer weather's approaching the Northeast.
I think the biggest thing about the Mets and how they're built is the fall off from the A squad to the B squad isn't very far. It's not oh my God, what are we going to get out of this guy? It's this guy can keep pace. Unless you're talking about a Juan Soto and the way that he's hitting now, you're not saying that, oh my God, if he was to take a down, like Starling Marte couldn't hit you 240 and 7 home runs. Those are the kinds of things where it used to be the superstar players are the guys who are going to carry us, and then there'd be an injury. And then all of a sudden you got a guy who's barely a replacement player. Right now, you got guys that are coming in and they're replacing the guys that may be struggling or may be injured, whatever it may be. And there's not a big fall off. They're able to weather the storm because they're getting production out of those guys. And a guy like Luis Torrens, who was no one 2 years ago, right? And it was because of his relationship with Carlos Mendoza, because of Carlos Mendoza's knowledge of how good of a catcher he was, and that he could swing the bat a little bit if given an opportunity. It's hard for guys like that. I was one of those guys that you're always wondering, is today going to be my last day in the big leagues? Because if I have a bad game, if I have a bad outing, if they have a better option, a high paid player is going to be ahead of me. And the Mets don't care about that anymore. What the Mets care about is, can you get the job done? So you see Luis Torrens being in the lineup over Alvarez. And that wouldn't have happened a couple of years ago. It would have been, we're going to ride or die with this kid because he's our top prospect. Major League Baseball prospect pipeline says so. So that's what we're going with. And they would ride with a guy who's, even in his glory of 24 home runs, he batted 209. Right. So we've never seen a Francisco Alvarez that we heard about coming up, this prodigious power hitter who was going to, revolutionize the Mets catching forever. We haven't seen that guy yet. And I don't think the Mets can sit around and wait if they want to be competitive in the National League the way that they were last year and prove that it wasn't a fluke.
Yeah, for sure. Do you take much? Do the players take much out of a series? In a series that's highlighted obviously by two of the upper echelon teams in the National League. Like, if the Mets got swept by Los Angeles, would it be an indictment, or would it be a case where confidence would be lost? Do we build it up too much from a player perspective, Figgy, or no?
No, I think what it is it's more about trusting the game plan. You always hear that, right? Trust the process, trust the game plan. But it's about, we executed and we were able to do what we did, and we proved it against the best team in baseball, the best hitter in baseball. Look at the difference of how they pitched against Shohei Ohtani than most of baseball, right? So we saw that with Aaron Judge last year, how the Mets pitched against him, how the Mets, they learn how to attack a hitter, and there's a game plan to attack a hitter, and each guy is different. When we used to get pitching reports, it was right-handed pitchers are going to throw him this, left-handed pitchers are going to throw him that, and that was the extent of it. Now you're getting, if you have a slider with 2,700 RPMs, like X, Y, and Z, you're going to throw it to this guy. Other than that, you're not using that pitch. So it's more specialized. It's very more, it's very much more dialed in to a specific pitcher's strengths. And I think you see that maximized. And even when you're playing against a team like that, like, you go out there, how deep that lineup is. There are guys that you got to avoid. There's guys that you got to find a way to kind of pitch around and get to guys that you feel like you can get out. You're going to give up the occasional home run to guys like Pages, and, we saw Max Muncy hit the 2 home runs. But for the most part, that meat of the order is not doing a lot of damage for the Dodgers. And that's something that you can take, because you can see what happened, in certain situations, what works, and then either go back to it, because they're going to make adjustments. That's why they're so good at what they do, right? So when this series will define a couple of things, is the biggest thing I think is you can go toe-to-toe with the best in baseball.
As far as the Yankees are concerned, they got shut down last night by the Cleveland Guardians. I think Boone, said, listen, it's just one of 162. You're going to have these kind of games. Not much going offensively. I mean, you really got next to nothing. I mean, they have like 3-4 hits. They got shut down. The Guardian starter was fantastic. Cleveland's bullpen, you had Clase going out there and throwing, 102-mile-an-hour cutters in the bottom half of the 9th inning. I mean, ridiculous velocity from a guy who's been one of the upper echelon closers in all of Major League Baseball. Not much to scream and holler about when you're looking at the Yankees, Figgy. I don't think there's, it's they just look lifeless offensively.
Yeah, and that happens. It happens. It's peaks and valleys. You try to keep it more in the middle, right? But not go so far as, wow, we're the best team in baseball. And then, oh my God, we can't. We saw that last year with them, right? That fall off that they had for 30 games, where they lost 22 of the 30 games. And you're sitting back going, what happened to the Yankees here? Like, Judge was still in the lineup, Soto was still in the lineup. It's so foregone thought of that little stretch that they had last year because they made it all the way to the World Series. So it's a long season. It's not 16 games, 17 games like football. So you don't, sit there and go, oh my God, this week they're the best in the game. Tomorrow they're the worst in the game. So you face the pitcher and the old adage, right? You're only as good as the next day your starting pitcher. Yeah, and how deep can they go in the game? How off bounds? How do they set up hitters? And they didn't have an answer for. Oh my God, what am I blanking on his name last night?
Cruz?
The no, the starting pitcher for the
Oh, yes, yes,
Cardinals.
yes.
Oh my God, what Ortiz? I think it was. He was nasty. Like, he had really good stuff. And again, you got these guys now with plus arms, plus stuff that you don't really know. They're coming up and down, especially with an organization like Cleveland, who give you some no-name guys every now and then. And hey, you know what? You just tip your cap, you move on. You don't dwell on it. You go out and see if you can win the series.
We'll come back. We'll take a quick time out. We'll talk a little bit about the Stanley Cup final. Game one went final last night, an overtime affair up in Edmonton. NBA finals and the latest and greatest with the New York Knicks. It's Figgie and the Moose on this Thursday right here on Pix 11 Plus. Welcome back. It's Figgie and the Moose right here on Pix 11 Plus. Marc Malusis and Nelson Figueroa. Figgie, you got parade coverage Saturday, correct, on Pix 11?
I do. 116th Street Parade, the precursor to the Puerto Rican Day Parade. It's going to be a fantastic event. Myself and Vanessa Freeman will be hosting 2 hours from 2 to 4 on both Pix 11 Plus and Pix 11 Live. It'll be I'm sure it's going to be not only a star-studded event, but the pour out of Puerto Ricans all over the streets of Manhattan are going to be a great time.
You saw game one of the Stanley Cup final went final last night up in Edmonton as the Oilers win in overtime. Leon Draisaitl from Connor McDavid with a power play late in OT. Panthers and Paul Maurice, they blow a 3-1 lead in that second period. And I think it was a 26-game winning streak and a 10-game winning streak in this postseason where they had a lead going into the third period where they eventually won it. They had a 3-2 lead going into the third last night. They lose it. So the Oilers, who were a slight favorite going into the series, now lead the series 1-0, a rematch of what we saw last year in the Stanley Cup final. And finally we get game one tonight of the NBA finals out in Oklahoma City. The Thunder, a decided favorite against the Indiana Pacers. When you look at it, Indiana, obviously the massive underdog. I know there are not a lot of Knick fans are going to be rooting for the Indiana Pacers, but I think if you don't have a dog in the fight, Figgy, as the cliche goes, I think there's going to be a lot of people that are going to root for the Pacers to pull off the upset.
Yeah, when you see a team that's so dominant, wire to wire, like Oklahoma City, you want to see them get punched in the mouth at least a scratch. If they go out and they blow them out and they sweep them, and you see it's a no contest, that's not going to make for a fun NBA Finals. Two small market teams, with some real, you would say, star power that beneath the surface. You got the MVP and SGA, where just a few years ago he was in a trade, gets there with Oklahoma City, and they have just looked the last 2 seasons like a just a dominant basketball team who has figured out their roster and their personnel, and they play to their strengths at all times. It's still odd to me that they lost by 42 points in the Western Conference Finals. That makes no sense, right? But at the end of the day, they get to the finals, and you're going to see them possibly have another gear in there. And it's scary to think that if they do have another gear. But we've seen the Pacers, how gritty, how determined they are. They go and they battle. And sometimes for Cinderella, it's their year, and they got to go out there and prove it. So it'll be interesting to see if they can find a way, like they do with the Knicks, shock them by getting game one.
Yeah, we'll see. I hope we get a great series. I think in all likelihood we probably won't. I'm I'm gonna force it to 6 games. I'm gonna take the Thunder in 6. I mean, they're like a 6 to 7-1 favorite to win
Yeah.
the series. I mean, I'm gonna take Oklahoma City. I'm not gonna overthink it. Would never bet it. I'm not telling you to go out there and bet it, but I think the Thunder. I think they learned their lesson that Denver Nuggets series. They failed last year in the postseason. They've gotten better defensively. I think the size is going to be an issue. I think the rebounding is going to be an issue for Indiana unless they go out there and consistently, if they're shooting 54% from the field, if they're shooting 55% from three, Figgy, then anything's possible. I mean, the Pacers maybe have that kind of a run here in the NBA Finals. I just find it hard to believe that they will. I'm going to take the Thunder in 6. What do you like?
Yeah, I'm very similar to that. Thunder in 6. I think what you're looking at is how they match up, right? Because we've seen we talk about a team having an identity and how they play and their style of play. How does it work against that opponent, especially not just for one game, but for a long series? So the adjustments that are going to be made from game to game. Can Indiana play a different style of basketball? Because we know that Oklahoma City can go up and down the court. We know they can shoot the three. We know they're a better rebounding team than the Indiana Pacers. So everything that's a strength for Indiana is a strength for Oklahoma City. So it'll be interesting to see if they can truly keep pace, because they ran, circles around the Knicks, and you can see, guys with their hands on their knees in the fourth quarter, beginnings of the fourth quarter in that Knicks series. Whereas on the other side of it, they just seem to keep coming in waves, bringing guys off the bench, and certain guys getting hot. And you had historic games from players, and sometimes it takes that. So I think the Knicks can take a little bit of credence that it was a historic game by Halliburton, a historic game by Neesmith. Neesmith when he went off with all the 3-pointers. So historic happenings had to happen to knock off a team like the Knicks. It's going to have to continue to be like that if they're going to have any chance against Oklahoma City.
As far as the Knicks are concerned, we'll see where they go from here. I mean, we've heard our thoughts here on digital. You've heard our thoughts on, on Pix 11 on Sports Nation Nightly, which you can check out each and every night at 7 p.m. We're off tonight. We'll be back with you tomorrow night, right on Channel 11 on Pix 11. But we've kind of turned the page on, the decision, how it went down, why, and now the question is, where do exactly the Knicks go from here? It seems like the apple of the Knicks' eye. There is no game plan whatsoever. They're gonna, have a huge net in terms of interviewing a lot of people, but the apple of their eye seems to be guys that already have jobs, which is kind of funny when you think about it. Jason Kidd with the Dallas, Ime Udoka with the Houston Rockets. So they don't really have draft capital to go out there and get this coach. I'm fascinated to see exactly who they roll out there to be the next Knicks head coach that has this championship experience, because now we know the singular focus is on winning a title for the fans. That's the singular focus for Leon Rose and James Dolan and company. Where exactly do they go that's going to be just as good of a head coach? And you're starting to hear more and more about the players that were griping when they had these exit meetings after the season came to an end. So I mean, it always makes sense for leadership to just lean into the players because they were unhappy with their roles or how things were specifically handled, especially emotionally after a season came to an end, and then make the rash decision to fire the head coach without a game plan whatsoever about where they're going to go next. But it's the Knicks. So, you know what? Believe that they're going to get it right because they always do. And I say that sarcastically.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, you look at the list of candidates that are available, and you're talking about college coaches or guys with very little experience at the NBA level, right? And is that really what you're going to go to from Tom Thibodeau, building back some not street cred, actual credibility for the Knicks over the past 5 years? 4 times in the playoffs over the last 5 years. You get to the Eastern Conference Finals. You're a few faux pas and missed opportunities away from possibly being in the finals. And yes, were there flaws to this Knicks team? Absolutely. Were they exposed those flaws in a huge way? Rick Carlisle did a fantastic job of that, right? Going after their 2 best offensive players and turning them on the defensive side, which they are very weak at, and took advantage of poor footwork, poor ability to get off the ground as a 7-footer for Karl Anthony Towns, and no block shots out of him. But you get him off the ground, and all of a sudden you get him into foul trouble very early. So a coach that has to come in. How can he command the respect of these players? He's got to have championship pedigree. He's got to have rings on his finger and walk in and say, "Hey, I know what it takes to get to win a ring." Who is available of that nature? Well, Mike Malone is the only guy that right now that has a championship ring, but he just got fired before the playoffs with a team from a team that just won an NBA championship. So there's something there as well, right? With the way that the players viewed him. How do you get rid of a guy with 3 days left before you're about to start the playoffs?
No, I know.
And he just won an NBA championship 2 years ago. So there's something there as well. So if you were counting that as your ace in the hole, why was he fired? Why was he let go? We don't know yet. He was a great analyst on TV. Who knows? Maybe he says, I don't want to worry about being a head coach and all the pressure that comes in. I'd rather sit here talking basketball for the next 20 years. So to go out there and do what they did without a plan, without you would say plan B. No, it's more than a plan B. Their plan A is not even an idea as of yet. So I can't see how they turn the page so quickly and who they go to. You want to talk about the amount of pressure they are under, because it's not finals, not reaching the finals. It's championship or bust.
Yeah.
So that's a 2-year gig. If you don't go 15 plus wins in back-to-back seasons and win an NBA championship, you're out of a job. If you sign a 5-year deal, you're out of a job. So maybe you sit back and take the $30 million for the next 3 years afterwards. It's not a bad gig if you can get it. We've seen that happen all over, sports, with all these head coaches getting fired so quickly after the investment of $30 million in an extension and never letting them see the extension. Now you're going to go sign a guy for at least a 5-year deal they're going to want, right? And then you're talking about maybe $50 million.
Yeah, it's just I think it's just terrible. I mean, it's just terrible. The way you cut it
makes no sense.
No. Well, Figgy, enjoy your day off. All right.
You as well.
Good luck with your lessons. Thank you. And we'll be back with you tomorrow right here on Pix 11 Plus. Sports Nation Nightly with you tomorrow night at 7 p.m. on Pix 11. Have yourself a wonderful Thursday. For Nelson Figueroa, I'm Marc Malusis. This has been Figgie and the Moose right here on Pix 11 Plus.